I will confess, I'm a prologue skeptic. I I have only been talked into a prologue twice by my clients. I feel like I see a lot of the same prologue where it'll show the protagonist at a dire moment and then jump back. It's like the book equivalent of the film device where it's like, you must be wondering how I got in this predicament.
Record
That's
scratch.
really that's what always goes through my head when I read those types of prologues, where it's like, okay, here's a dire moment, like, oh, I feel like I'm going to be dragged for this, but like Twilight is a prime example of that. That prologue,
Please go on.
I feel like someone's going to attack me, but the Twilight prologue is an example of you must be wondering how I got in this situation. Like, and in my mind, and this is purely subjective and how I rationalize a successful prologue versus an unsuccessful prologue, in my opinion. I feel like I'm prefacing everything, but in my opinion, a prologue has to provide necessary information that the reader needs at page one. Like the reader needs this info that the prologue's going to provide in order to understand the book from the beginning. And if they don't have this information, they're going to have way too many questions and the ground under their feet's going to be unsteady. And the second is that a prologue has to provide that vital information in a way that it cannot be conveyed in chapter one. So it cannot be told by the protagonist at the age that the book starts or by the protagonist at all. Like it's got to be someone providing critical information that you need at the start of chapter one, but the person providing that information is not in chapter one. So, if the first 10 pages are not reflective of your query, I understand the predicament there. I don't think tacking on a prologue is the right choice. I think, and that's when it gets tough because you want your pages to be reflective of the story you're pitching. Like you don't want to overpromise and underdeliver. But I think at that point as a writer, you have to ask yourself the question, is this where the story needs to start? If they're not reflective of the story you're pitching in the query, maybe you're starting too early or too late, and maybe it's a question of if this is the story and this is how people are going to talk about it, am I either doing too much or not doing enough in those opening pages that it is distracting from that or obscuring that? So it's tough. It's tough.
Yeah. What if, hypothetically, from an artistic perspective, the prologue makes sense and passes your test, but it still does not in any way match what happens for like 10 to 20 pages after that? Do you think we send it and put in a note?
Um, I think if you have a prologue that works and follows those rules, but it doesn't match the query, then I think you kind of cheat a little bit and start at chapter one.
That's my advice
Yeah.
every time.